There are certain words you don't use lightly. Words that, once spoken, can never be taken back. Words that reframe everything that came before them. Paul Burrell, Princess Diana's former butler, the man she called her rock, the man who held a grief-stricken Prince Harry in his arms the night he returned from his mother's funeral, has just used one of those words about Meghan Markle. The word is predator. Not difficult. Not manipulative. Not even calculating. Predator. And if you think that's shocking, wait until you hear what else he's revealed. Because Paul Burrell has finally broken his decades-long silence, and what he's saying about the Duchess of Sussex is sending shockwaves through the royal world that won't stop. This isn't coming from a tabloid journalist with an unnamed source. This isn't palace gossip whispered through back channels. This is coming from a man who spent 10 years as Princess Diana's closest confidant, who witnessed the collapse of her marriage from inside the walls of Kensington Palace, and who knew her secrets, her fears, and her hopes for her sons. And now, in his new memoir and a series of explosive interviews, he's delivering a verdict on Meghan Markle that nobody inside the royal establishment has dared to make this publicly, this directly, this devastatingly. Before we get into exactly what he said, you need to understand who Paul Burrell is, because his proximity to Diana isn't just a biographical detail, it's the entire reason his words carry the weight of an earthquake. Burrell entered royal service in 1976 as an 18-year-old footman at Buckingham Palace. Within a year, he became Queen Elizabeth's personal footman. But it was in 1987 when his life changed forever. He joined the household of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, and from that moment, he belonged to her. Not as a servant in the distant, formal sense, but as the person who was there when the cameras turned off. He watched her marriage disintegrate. He witnessed Charles's affair with Camilla play out in real time. He held Diana together through bulimia, through panic attacks, through the loneliness that gilded palace walls couldn't cure. And when she died in that Paris tunnel in 1997, Burrell carried her secrets to what he thought would be his grave. But then the palace turned on him. In 2002, he was prosecuted for allegedly stealing Diana's possessions. The case collapsed when Queen Elizabeth herself intervened, and in that moment, the Official Secrets Act that had bound him for decades was effectively shattered. The institution set him free to speak, and now, 23 years later, he's speaking louder than ever. So when Paul Burrell looks at Meghan Markle and uses the word predator, he's not throwing around inflammatory language for attention. He's making an assessment based on pattern recognition, the kind you only develop when you've spent a decade learning to read the private behavior of one of the most complex, scrutinized women in modern history. And the pattern he says he sees in Meghan is chilling in its consistency. In a television interview that left the host visibly stunned, Burrell described a behavior he claims he's watched Meghan repeat over and over. She befriends powerful, famous, influential people. She draws them close. She uses them for whatever purpose they serve, whether that's social credibility, career advancement, or public positioning. And then, when that purpose has been fulfilled, those people disappear. Gone. Discarded. Dropped without ceremony. Burrell didn't mince words. He said Meghan sucks them dry, and then they're gone. He pointed directly to David and Victoria Beckham as the most recent, most high-profile example. The Beckhams were at Harry and Meghan's wedding in 2018 and were photographed smiling, celebrated as proof that the Sussexes had arrived in the most elite social circles on the planet. And then came reports of a falling out so severe that David Beckham reportedly described himself as absolutely furious after Victoria was accused of leaking stories about the couple to the press. Burrell's response wasn't shock. It was recognition. He said people are beginning to feel they're being used by Meghan, and then he asked, with what sounded like genuine sadness, "Isn't it sad?" The Beckhams were there at the wedding, as were the Clooneys, as were the Obamas. Where are they now? But here's the revelation that's even more devastating, the one that reframes the entire Sussex story from its very foundation. In an interview timed with the release of his memoir, Burrell made a claim so direct, so fundamentally unsettling, that it's been quoted around the world. If Princess Diana were still alive, he says, Harry would never have married Meghan Markle. Not because Diana would have disliked Meghan. Not because she would have been prejudiced or unkind. But because the Harry that Meghan met, the Harry that proposed to her, the the Harry that walked away from his family and his country, wouldn't have existed. That Harry, Burrell argues, is a creation of grief. A man shaped by a wound that never healed because the one person who could have healed it was taken from him when he was 12 years old. Think about what that means. Burrell isn't saying Diana would have disapproved of the marriage. He's saying something far deeper and far more tragic. He's saying the marriage itself was only possible because Diana wasn't there to prevent the unraveling that made it inevitable. Burrell was specific about what he believes would have happened if Diana had lived. He said Harry would have married an English aristocratic girl, settled down, conformed, and done his job. He said Harry wouldn't have acted out, wouldn't have rebelled, and would never have crossed paths with her. Those words, crossed paths with her, carry an implication that's impossible to miss. This wasn't a love story written in the stars. This was a collision that only happened because Harry was running from something, and Meghan met him at the speed of that run. But then Burrell went further, and this is where it becomes truly haunting. He said he could imagine Diana, had she lived, moving to California to be near Harry and Meghan. That she would have inserted herself into their lives, offering guidance, wisdom, and protection, the way only a mother who understood the brutal machinery of royal life could. And then he paused, and he said something that's been echoing in my mind ever since. He said, "But whether Meghan would take it is another thing." 5 words. But they plant a question that cuts to the very heart of everything that's happened since 2018. Was Meghan willing to be guided? Was she interested in learning from the institution she married into, or only in the platform it could give her? And what does it say about a person that even the imagined presence of Princess Diana, the most beloved royal figure of the 20th century, is offered as a force that Meghan might have resisted? Now, I want you to think about something, because this next revelation has not gotten nearly the attention it deserves, and it's perhaps the most psychologically revealing thing Burrell has put on record. He believes he knows the exact moment the rift between Meghan and Kate began. Not the bridesmaid dress argument. Not the tears before the wedding. Earlier. Much earlier. It was a dinner. Burrell takes readers back to the early days of Harry and Meghan's relationship. They were living at Nottingham Cottage, a small, 2-bedroom house on the grounds of Kensington Palace. Low ceilings. Modest rooms. Historic, yes, but cramped. Meanwhile, William and Kate were living in apartment 1A, a recently renovated residence complete with 20 rooms and its own ballroom. One evening, Harry and Meghan were invited to dinner at William and Kate's apartment. And when Meghan walked in and saw the grandeur, the high ceilings, the sweeping rooms, the ballroom that sat beneath the same roof as her tiny cottage, something shifted. Burrell wrote the words carefully. This may be where the trouble began. He didn't make the accusation explicit, but the implication couldn't be clearer. Meghan arrived at Kensington Palace expecting a certain kind of royal life, and what she found was a hierarchy, visual and spatial, in which she was very much not at the top. William and Kate were the senior royals. Their apartment was proof of that. And Meghan, whatever she had imagined, was living in a 2-bedroom, evidence that she had married the spare, not the heir. Burrell's framing raises an uncomfortable question about human nature. How many relationships have been destroyed not by cruelty, but by comparison? Not by an argument, but by a ballroom that belonged to someone else? It's a small detail, a dinner invitation, or a tour of an apartment, but if Burrell is right, it was the crack in the foundation that everything else was built on. And nowhere is that foundation more visibly shattered than in the relationship between the two brothers. If Burrell's words about Meghan have been explosive, his words about Prince William have been devastating in a different, quieter way. Because Burrell watched William grow up. He was there when William was a boy learning to navigate a household torn apart by his parents' warfare. And now, as William stands on the edge of becoming king, Burrell says what's happening between the brothers isn't a temporary fight. It's a closing. Make no mistake, Burrell said, William is keeping Kate and his family well away from Meghan and Harry. The door is shut, and there is no way in. The reason, as Burrell sees it, is simple and irreversible. William doesn't just feel hurt. He feels betrayed. Not by the Netflix documentary. Not by the memoir. but by something deeper, a violation of trust that can't be repaired by a phone call or a carefully staged reunion.
William knows Harry can't be trusted, Burrell said, and he doesn't want any more upset in his family.
Then Burrell went further. He said William now regards Harry as background noise and that he's likely okay with never speaking to him ever again. When Burrell was asked about the brief meeting between Harry and King Charles in 2025, a reunion that sparked hope in some quarters that the family might be healing, Burrell was notably unimpressed. Because the meeting that would matter, he said, wasn't with Charles. It was with William. And that meeting, in his view, isn't coming. He said it's inconceivable that William would ever trust him again. That's not the language of a family argument. That's the language of a burial. And what makes it unbearable, what gives it the particular grief that only Burrell can deliver, is that he's saying this as someone who watched Harry run into his arms after Diana's funeral, who knew these boys, who knew what their mother dreamed they would become together. But perhaps the most painful part of everything Burrell has said isn't about Meghan at all. It's about Harry himself. Because Burrell doesn't dislike Harry. What he feels is closer to mourning. In a statement that's been quoted repeatedly since his book's publication, Burrell described watching Harry's transformation over the past several years with quiet disbelief. He said, "I just don't understand all this petulance and entitlement. These are new things which have come his way, and I don't know who sowed those seeds because they were never there as a child." Read that again. He doesn't know who sowed those seeds. The implication hangs in the air like smoke. Then Burrell asked a question that no royal commentator, with all their analysis and palace access, has been able to answer. Where is that lovely, jokey boy now? He described the Harry he knew growing up as kind, generous, warm-hearted, and carefree. The boy who made people laugh in the corridors of Kensington Palace. The teenager who smiled even when the weight of his mother's death sat visibly on his shoulders. That's the boy Diana raised. And the man Burrell sees today, the man who wrote a memoir attacking his family, who compared his relationship with his father to a hostage situation, who filed lawsuits and gave interviews painting himself as a victim, that man is almost unrecognizable. Then Burrell drew a comparison. Nobody in his position has made this directly. William hasn't gone wrong, and he lost his mother too. Both brothers lost Diana. Both were 12 and 15 years old when their world ended on a Paris road in 1997. Both carried that grief into adulthood. But one of them remained, at his core, recognizable. The other became someone else. And the question Burrell leaves hanging, the one underneath every page of his memoir, every interview he's given, is this: what changed Harry? Or more precisely, who? Paul Burrell is 67 years old. He has survived a criminal trial, public feuding with the princes, a cancer diagnosis, and the deaths of the two women he served most loyally. He has nothing left to lose, no position to protect, no future employment to risk. That's what makes everything he's saying so significant. When he calls Meghan a predator, he's not selling books. He's watching a man he helped raise become unrecognizable, and he's concluded that Meghan Markle played a central role in that transformation. When he says Diana would have been disappointed, he's translating the wishes of a woman he knew intimately into a verdict on her son's choices. The silence is over. The secrets are out. And the portrait Paul Burrell has painted of Meghan Markle, of Harry's transformation, and of a family fractured beyond repair, is one that cannot be unseen. If this opened your eyes, subscribe, because the next revelation is coming sooner than anyone expects. And tell me in the comments, do you believe Paul Burrell is speaking truth, or does he have his own agenda? The debate is wide open.